So today's psalm is Psalm 43. And the segula for this psalm is that it is for the end of the sorrows of the Jewish people, as well as an end to one's personal sorrows, to rebuild the Beit HaMikdash. And it's also just like last week's psalm, Psalm 42. It's a psalm to say if one was replaced in one's position at work or something similar. Okay. So we can link these two ideas by realizing that the Jewish people, in a way, have been replaced or misplaced, certainly replaced in terms of our ascendancy. Okay, we're supposed to be the ascendant ones. Currently, we're not. Okay, God willing, that will change very, very soon. Okay, so this psalm is a continuation of Psalm 42, which we did last week. And if you haven't seen that video, it is posted on YouTube and you're welcome to watch it. We are yearning for an end to this brutal exile, and it is quite brutal. And we have to fight on both the national level and the personal level for um, focusing ourselves on hope and the geula and the positive outcome that is sure to come. Don't doubt it. Rabbi Nachman speaks about this time, the end times, as being like a giant cloth, like imagine a tablecloth full of crumbs being shaken off. And we have to hang on very, very tight to that cloth so we don't get shaken off. Shaken off means we lose our amunah, we lose our bitachon, we lose our hope. And so we don't want to do that. We really want to hang on. And as this war drags on and in some ways escalates, and as is the anti-Semitism in some way drags on, in other ways is escalating, it can become easier for people to get used to it, lose that powerful amuna they had in the beginning, and so on. And Rebbe Nachman tells us we have to always remain strong and hang on to our amuna and do things to increase our amuna. For some people, that means a class. For other people, that means saying Tehillim. For other people, that means doing mitzvahs, doing mitzvot, doing good deeds, whatever it is to increase your amuna. Okay, whatever you have found to increase it, employ it now, full force. Okay. Rav Hirsch says about this psalm is that it's speaking about a goy lo chassid. When we get to the first verse, we'll see it, but this is part of my introduction to this psalm. These are people that we are fighting against that pretend. I'm going to sort of read you a condensation of what he said. They pretend to be interested in humanitarianism, but that is all for show, especially once it concerns the Jews. They believe Jews are not worthy of being treated with common decency. Okay, that's specifically from Rav Hirsch. Everybody else can be treated with common decency except Jews. And when the nations see that we're vulnerable, they pounce. And their base hatred, their animalistic lack of morals is revealed as they treat us with inhumanity. When I read this, when I read all the commentaries on this psalm, I just it's like a mirror for today. So much so, as much as any of the past few weeks psalms we've explored, and maybe even more. He also describes, he doesn't refer to it as projection, but he describes the projection the nations engage in. So they take their own wickedness, their injustice, their unfairness, their violence, and they project it onto us. I hate to say this because I don't really want to quote like news sources, but the truth is a genocide was perpetrated on the Jewish people, okay, on October 7th. And what are the nations screaming? They're screaming genocide. This is Rav Hirsch's discussion of this. Now, as we read the psalm, we'll just be amazed to hear this. Now, this psalm is also part of Tikun Chatzot. What is Tikun Chatzot? So this is the midnight prayer that used to be in every single siddur. Now, the midnight refers to halachic midnight, which changes depending on the time of year. It's usually between like 11 p.m. and sort of 1:30 a.m. It depends where you're located and what time of year it is. And this is in every Breslov siddur, and it's in many Hasidic siddurim, okay, many Nusach Sephard, and it's also in some Sephardic siddurim as well. And this psalm is part of Tikun Leah. Tikun Chatzot has two sections, Tikun Rachel and Tikun Leah. And this is a psalm and a tikkun in general that do offer hope. And they offer hope. Interestingly enough, we can see this through hindsight or through our perspective today. They offer hope through prophecy, through this connection with the idea that David saw it all. Even the commentators, as I go through them, they saw it all. And that has to comfort us because they've already predicted it. They've already seen it. They're telling us what will happen so far, and they're telling us what will happen in the future. So we can rely on them. We can count on our tzaddikim. One more thing about Tikun Chatzot that I want to mention is in some circles, women don't say it. In many circles, women do. But young mothers tend not to because they need to get their sleep and wake up early to take care of children and so on. It depends on the person. Some say it every night. Most women do not. I would say many say it once a month at least. Some say it once a week. So if it's something you wish to explore, you have a Breslov siddur, you'll find it in there. You might also find it online. And of course, like everything else, each community has its own nusach for it. Okay. And I don't know why this prayer was lost, but it was lost. It lost its status as an important prayer service of the day, probably because it's very hard getting up at that time of night. Okay, so let's begin with the first verse. Shafteni Elohim v'riva, rivi megoy lo chasid, me'ish mirma va'avla sifalteni. Okay. Avenge me, O Hashem. Champion my cause against the nation without kindness. Okay, the nation that I mentioned at the beginning. Help me to escape from a man of deceit and injustice, or also could be read as iniquity, as deep sin. So Rashi says that what we're doing here, and it's interesting. He's not saying that we should read Shaftani as avenge, although most translators do. He's saying we should read it very specifically as judge me, okay, from, of course, the word shofet, okay. And the idea is he wants Hashem to judge us compared to who? The nation that's low chassid, the nation without kindness, without piousness, without morality, with injustice. Because when Hashem judges us compared to that nation, or all the nations like that, we will come out looking very good despite our flaws. And we can see this. I mean, we're not perfect. And yet, when we compare ourselves to the nations as a whole, and certainly specific nations, we see that we are very righteous, we are very good. okay? And again, hinting back to the beginning, we have to remember that the nations are engaging in projection on us, and we can't take that projection onto ourselves. We get very defensive, but look how moral the IDF is. Look how moral the Jewish people is. We give more tzedakah, more charity than anyone else. They don't care. It doesn't matter to them, okay? The defenses in that case fall on very deaf ears. They're not interested in the facts, okay? They're only interested in creating reasons for hatred. Now, Rashi and Ramban say that this verse also hints to Yishmael. Why Yishmael specifically? Okay, because he was raised by Avraham. Who was Avraham? Avraham Avinu, he embodied chesed. We are taught that he embodied the first of the lower sephirot, okay? So Avraham was the embodiment of loving kindness, generosity, hospitality, and so on. So the nations who are the descendants, at least if not the genealogical descendants, and many are, but the spiritual descendants, as we see in Southeast Asia and places like that, the non-Arab nations, we can see that they hate us and treat us more cruelly than anyone else because they don't have a handle on that kindness. And they resent our kindness. They resent us showing them what their father, their forefather wanted. It's this is really psychospiritual, okay? This is really the connection between our psychology, their psychology, and how it is expressed throughout the ages spiritually. Okay, Sforno says, these are the most dangerous villains, the ones who engage in this kind of projection and so on. Why? Because they are hypocrites, and hypocrisy is the most dangerous thing. So I want to tell you that I was thinking about this. How are they hypocrites, aside from the projection? And it occurred to me that the culture of the Yishmaelim, the descendants, does exhibit some kindness for sure. For example, they are known for their hospitality. And this might be something I mentioned in a previous class. I'm not sure if I mentioned it, but they're known for welcoming people into their homes. And when someone's in their homes, they protect them. They are very, very good hosts. Okay. No harm can come to someone in their homes. But the second a guest crosses the threshold, that hospitality is thrown into the bin. And that person can now be viewed as an enemy to be slaughtered, God forbid. Okay. So there are measures of kindness that we can see. Okay. But again, it's subject to arbitrary rules that are gleaned from a distortion of our tradition. And we won't go too much into that. That information is available elsewhere online. Now, Afshik says something also interesting. He says that Nebuchadnezzar heard a voice and heard a prophecy, he says, from Hashem, and perhaps he did, to destroy the Beit HaMikdash. But why did he go ahead and destroy the Beit HaMikdash? Because he hated Jews. This is really a message to us. The same way the Romans destroyed the second Beit HaMikdash because they hated Jews, they're the spiritual heirs to Esau. So we have this psalm referring to the Ishmaelim, again, spiritual descendants, and the Edom, okay, or Esau, spiritual descendants, pretending to be righteous. How does Esau pretend to be righteous? He asked his father, Yitzchak, how do we tithe salt? Okay, and there's no tithe for salt. Okay, so he was making kind of a false conversation to show his father how pious he was. So we can see now that all the commentators are referring to our enemies. There are more as well, but the two main ones, okay, Ishmael and Esav, and what they are saying is that they aren't kind and they are unjust. And if we see that the verses, if you have the psalm in front of you, the verse is divided into two, okay? And the injustice, I would say, in large part from Esav is expressed through bodies like the UN and DEI, which isn't a body, but an ideology, and bodies like elite universities, and so on. That's how Esav expresses its injustice, and through all-out hostilities, wars, violence, murder, and all those disgusting things. That's how Yishmael expresses its lack of kindness. Again, I have no choice. We began the series focusing on the inner psycho-spiritual world, but I feel so compelled when I read these recent chapters that there's no choice but to make it a commentary on what's going on today. And again, like I said at the beginning, this gives us a lot of hope. Why does this give us hope? It gives us hope because we can see the nevuah, the prophecy, and then we know that there's also prophecy for a positive outcome. Okay. So that has to give us hope. Okay. All right. Let me see. So also I want to say, I thought of something also from Avodah Zarah in the Talmud. It's one of the few Gemaras I'm kind of familiar with, personally familiar with. So it teaches that in the world to come, Hashem is going to take the Torah in his embrace and say, all who occupied himself with this, come and collect your reward. And immediately all of the nations came around, okay? And the nation of Rome, Edom, Esav, entered. And Hashem said to Rome, how did you occupy yourself with the Torah? And Rome said, well, Hashem, we built many markets and bathhouses and collected a lot of money. And we did this all so the children of Israel could sit and learn Torah. And Hashem is going to say, you're fools. You did it all for yourself. You built the markets for prostitutions, the bathhouses for you to enjoy, and the gold and silver are mine anyway. Okay. And so we have this, it goes down a list of nations. So we have this understanding that even when the nations claim they're doing good for us, and again, my first thought was the League of Nations, which turned into the UN. What a farce. How long did the League of Nations after World War II support the Jews and support Israel? I don't know, months maybe, certainly not more than a couple of years before it turned into the most virulently anti-Semitic body on earth. Okay, so it's just this first verse we could think about, go on and on about it. We won't, but we could. Okay, let's continue to verse 2. Ki ata Elohei ma'utzi, lama zanachtani, lama koder es halech, belachatz oyev. Okay, you are the God of my might. Why have you abandoned me? Why must I walk about in gloom, oppressed by the enemy? So we can see this as a positive statement of David's expression of total belief, total faith and trust that Hashem is the God of my might. Even though he personally didn't experience, for example, the splitting of the Red Sea, okay, when Hashem was called mighty, he still takes that on after the generations as his own inner relationship to Hashem. He views Hashem in so many ways, loving father, king, and so on, but he also views him as a mighty God. And he's asking him here, why have you abandoned me? Why do I have to walk about in gloom? So we know that David went through a lot. If you've been in this class a while, we discussed his history, his illness, his just terrible suffering of betrayals, just unbelievable. And this could lead to gloom. And it sounds like this verse is saying, I am feeling depressed because you abandoned me. The next verse is going to answer that. But what David is really saying here, okay, is that if I didn't view you as the God of my might, this is one interpretation of this verse, then I would walk about in gloom. Then I would feel abandoned. Okay. So you have to read this a few different ways. We always have to read these verses not only through the eyes of our sages, but also with our own eyes and find meaning for ourselves in these verses. Okay, let's continue. Oh, and I do want to say gloom, depression, darkness, that kind of inner stuff. Rebbe Nachman says that's totally the Yetzer Hara, and we have to fight against it. Very important. Because if we look around, it's easy to get gloomy. It's very easy to get gloomy. It's the easiest thing in the world because it's perhaps the most powerful Yetzer Hara. And Rebbe Nachman says we can't succumb. Don't succumb to gloom and depression. Fight it with all your might. Do what it takes to overcome it. Okay, we're on verse 3. Shalach oracha v'amitecha, hema yadchuni, yiviuni el har kadshecha ve'el mishkanosecha. Okay. Send your light and your truth. Let them guide me. They shall bring me to your holy mountain and to your dwelling places. So the holy mountain is the Temple Mount, and the dwelling places are either the courtyards in the Beit HaMikdash or possibly the Beit HaMikdash in Hashemayim, in the heavens. There's a spiritual Beit HaMikdash, and there's also an earthly one, okay? Now, we're talking here about the light of Hashem. And this light can be compared to Mashiach. And the truth that we're talking about here is Eliyahu Hanavi, who will announce the Mashiach. He will announce the Mashiach 3 days in advance if we're not worthy. If we are worthy, he will announce the Mashiach right when Mashiach comes. We'll hear the shofar and there will be Mashiach. Okay, that's what we're all hoping for. We don't want that 3-day lag. Okay, we don't want that 3-day lag because why? Because people doubt. People do fall into, oh, I heard the shofar, where's Mashiach? Okay, so we want the light and the truth to be simultaneous. Okay, Rashbam says we are asking Hashem here to send us the light of Nevuah. That is an Or Chadash, a new light that will come, that according to him, that will come down to us, okay, when the Geula occurs. Because right now we are not in a state of prophecy. And prophecy itself can be compared to light because it lights up our vision, so to speak. So we are here in this verse davening for Shia, for Eliyahu Hanavi, to come and announce him with truth, and for our own personal light, our own return to prophecy, not in the sense necessarily of prediction, although we'll have it, but in the sense of being able to have a relationship with Hashem with no occlusions, with a clear filter. You know, we make hitbodedut daily, okay? We talk to Hashem in our own words about whatever's on our heart and on our minds. We talk to Hashem about our past, present, and future. We share our hopes and dreams. And Rebbe Nachman says that when we do make hitbodedut, we do have a smidgen of Ruach HaKodesh, a kind of type of prophecy. Because when we talk to Hashem, he often puts the words in our mouths so we can talk to him more eloquently, more articulate, with more articulation. Okay. However, when we will have, God willing, very soon, that relationship with a higher level of nevuah, a higher level of prophecy, the relationship will be so close. We will experience Hashem so closely. We will be able to talk to him without any of the processing that slows us down now. Right now, I don't know about you, but many people can just jump in and talk to Hashem, but many people have to warm up, okay? Because we're supposed to talk to Hashem with our emotions, with all our heart. So we have to have a warm-up period. Okay, maybe we read some verses of Tehillim. Maybe we read some of Reb Noson's prayers from Likutei Tefillot, which is called the 50th Gate if you want to buy it from Breslov Research Institute. It's fantastic. Really good translation, Hebrew on one side, English on the other. Crystal clear, very beautiful. And even if we're just jumping in, are we talking from our higher hearts? Or are we talking from our hearts that are crunched up with suffering and pain? So when Mashiach comes and all these issues are resolved for us, we will be experiencing our relationship to Hashem much more smoothly, much more quickly, and with much more of a sense of truth. Okay, so we're davening for this. This is what we're praying for. All right. Why is Eliyahu Hanavi called the truth, as I mentioned? That's because he is going to be the final posek. He's going to be the final halachic decider, okay? And we know that when Mashiach comes, we won't be accepting any more converts. Okay, it has to be now, okay? So we need, if a person wants to be Jewish, they have to convert before Mashiach comes. And Eliyahu Hanavi will be also helping to adjudicate that conversions were done properly and things like this. God willing, all of them or most of them are. Okay. Let's see. Second. When you finish, I seem to have misplaced. Great. Part of my notes. Yes. Okay. Well, I'll continue anyway. Va'avoa el mizbach Elohim, el simchas gili, va'odcha bechinur Elohim, Elohai, so that I may come to the mizbeach of Hashem, to the altar of Hashem, to Hashem's gladness of my joy, okay, or to Hashem with gladness and joy, or to Hashem's gladness and joy, and I will praise you on the harp, Hashem, my God. Okay. So David's saying that I want the light and the truth to be here so that I can come to the altar and make sacrifices. Now, we know that David is speaking prophecy here because he very most likely knew at this point that he himself wasn't going to be making sacrifices in the first Beit HaMikdash, but perhaps he's speaking after Techiyas HaMesim, okay, Techiyat HaMesim, the resurrection of the dead in future times. Ma tishtochachi nafshi uma tehemi alai. Hochili lelohim kiyod odenu Yeshuot panai velohai. Why are you, you'll recognize this verse from last week. We said it twice last week. Why are you downcast, my soul? And why are you unsettled or disturbed on my account? Hope to God, for yet I shall thank him for the salvations of my countenance and because he is my God. Okay. So just like in Psalm 42, we said this verse twice. I don't remember which verses. I don't have my notes in front of me. Just like we said this in Psalm 42, we are ending sort of this series of Psalm 42 and 43. It's like a two-part series with the verse that's so prominently featured in the previous chapter. And this idea is David is speaking to his soul. And he's saying, why am I taking on the burden of this? Why am I so sad? What's the answer to this gloom, this oppression, this unsettledness, this we all have this, okay? This lack of yishuv hadat, this lack of a settled mind. Our minds are racing, our hearts are pounding, we feel vaguely unsettled or openly anxious. Okay, he's saying, why bother to do that? Just hope to God, hope to Him. If you hope to Him, you'll be able to thank Him for salvations. Okay, why? Because He is my God and He's your God. He's all our gods, and He's our personal God. At the ending of this psalm, which definitely addresses the national, but it ends with the personal, with this idea that Hashem is our God. We just have to hope to Him. We have to trust in Him, and salvations will come, and we will be able to be joyous and happy once more. Please, Hashem, we should experience the revelation and coming of Mashiach very, very soon. And the rebuilding of the Beit HaMikdash, the building of the third Beit HaMikdash, and I hope to see you all there. Okay. I'm going to stop recording, pause recording here.